Welcome back. In this tutorial, we will continue where we left off and look at some basic autofill options. We'll also go over other formatting options that Excel has available. All right, and finally, we'll try to use some simple formulas to calculate, let's say, the average of a particular score. Okay, and towards the very end of the tutorial, I'm going to introduce a concept called referencing, which is absolutely very important, not only for this tutorial, but also in general. It's the basic concept in Excel that you need to know very well. Okay, so I'll introduce that concept towards the very end of the tutorial called referencing. All right, when you get a chance, pause the video here, take a look at the screen. You already note that in the blank sheet, I've typed in some information. John, from cell number A1 to A7, DO1 to DO7 in the column B, and some scores. Let's say this is midterm exam and this is final exam. Okay, I've typed this in. So when you get a chance, pause the video and make sure that your screen looks exactly like this. Okay, and also don't forget, use the autofill option. We just practiced this in the last tutorial. You would want to use autofill options for each of these columns, okay, to enter the information instead of just typing away all this information. All right, so when you're ready, when your screen looks exactly like this, start playing the video again and we'll continue. So now we have information about 8 students and their scores on midterm 1 and midterm 2, and what we want to do for this tutorial is very simple: calculate the final score. Okay, and that's all we want to do. But before that, what I want to do is give each of these columns some headings and also make it look a bit nicer. Okay, so what you want to do is choose row number 1. You just want to hover the mouse over the row here, click on the row so you see the row highlighted, right click, and you basically insert. And you notice that when you press insert, the row was automatically inserted above the existing row, and all of the rows are renamed automatically. So something important to remember. The same thing when it comes to column. If you want to insert a column between A and B, you want to select column B and then press insert. All right, so let's come back here and let's type in let's say first name. I'm going to type in F name. If you want, you can type in first name. I'm going to type in last name and midterm, final exam. Okay, final. Okay, so make sure you have this, and if you want to do this, select A1 and then press down shift, press down on D1, and we can try to do some formatting. Make it bold. I pressed on the B button right up here, and then if you want, you can insert, let's say, a thick box border. Okay, and it's up to you. I'm just showing you some of the options that are available. You can also click on centering, which I like to do, and if you want to fill these boxes with, let's say, some color to make it look nicer, so basically you can do all this. Okay, now what I want you to do is go to A1, edit this to actually change it to first space name. Okay, again, remember, editing, you want to double click and then navigate your way around, right? And then you basically type in what you want to type in, first name. Okay, and press enter. So you have first name. I want you to do the same thing for last name. Press F2 or double click, type in last. Remember, if you don't do that, if you directly try to enter it, you may write over everything. So make sure that you edit it appropriately and you have first name, last name, midterm, and final. Okay, if you want, you can try to resize the columns, right, so that you have plenty of space and the letters don't bump up against each other. Same thing for midterm. Okay, so this is what we have right now. And now let's also try to insert another column here. Okay, go to row 1, right click, insert. All right, insert, in fact, 2 columns, insert another column. Okay, so now we have column 1 and column 2. In the very first column, A1, type in grade sheet. or some such thing. Okay, so grade sheet. What I want you to do now is basically center this across these first 4 columns, because that's where you have your information, right? And then center it, make it bold, and make it look nice. So the nice option for this is if you go to the top under the home ribbon, you have an option called merge center. Okay, so press that. So bingo, the first 4 cells have been now merged, and whatever information that you typed in there is now centered. Okay, now you go back to this the first row, select what you typed in, make it bold. If you want to increase the font size, feel free to do that. I'm going to make it 12. Press red and maybe fill it with some option if you want. Okay, so I'm going to fill this, let's say, with green. All right, now another thing that I want to do is show you how to do word wrap. Now let's try something different. So I want you to move this column A, right, all the way to close to where N is, and try to do something very similar for last name as well. Okay, now go to the cell A3, okay, and click on wrap text. Let's see what happens. So now you notice that Excel has automatically formatted by wrapping the text around the columns. Okay, do the same thing for the second column, last name. And again, you don't like the way the wrapping worked here, so what you might want to do is slightly move this so that you get something very similar here. And if you want to change the row width, you could come down here, right, so you can move the handle here to change the height of the rows. Okay, there are other ways of doing this, but I'm just doing it using the cursor. Okay, so resize it until you're satisfied with the formatting. Let's try and calculate the average. Okay, average of the 2 exams. All right, what you're going to do now is enter a formula. Okay, calculate a value by using a formula for the cell. All right, so open parenthesis, select the first value you want to add. That would be 10, and that happens to be located on C4. And please note the formula bar up here that also changes to C4. Okay, now we want to calculate sum, so you add this with the value in cell D4. So select D4. So make sure that when you finish doing this, right, and open parenthesis, what you see there is C4 plus D4, or the one you wanted to calculate, 10 plus 80. Okay, the cell addresses for those 2 values. So that's the sum, which is fine, but we want the average. So because there are 2 values here, what you want to do is divide by 2. So this is what you do for division. Press enter. So now if you notice, 10 plus 80 is 90, by 2 is 45. So Excel has calculated a value for this. Okay, so what you want to do now is, let's say that you want to calculate the average for all of these things. You could try to do this individually, like just what we did, but the easy way again is you would use the autofill. So the average is 45 for all these values here. To see if it's actually working, you could go up to the second row here, second row where the student information is present, right, which is row 5. E5 is a cell. If you look up the formula bar, it's C5 plus D5, which is C5 is right here, right, and D5. This is exactly what you want to calculate for the average right here. All right, again remember, here it's C4 and D4. When you used autofill to move down one row, now it's C5 and D5. So the formula automatically changed from C4 plus D4 to C5 plus D5, and so on. And this is the concept that I was talking to you about, referencing. So we'll come back to that concept later. Let's try to calculate the average. Let's see if there's an easier way to do the same. Okay, so the easier way is you type in equal to sign, okay, and you try to enter a formula. So the formula we are looking for would be under the formula ribbon. Okay, you could you could insert a function and start work here. And what we want is average. So press OK. This is what we want. It's automatically asking you, do you want a range? Do you want to specify a range? In this case, it's giving you by default C4 to E4. Do you think we want to do that? Not really. We want to calculate the average from C4 to D4. Okay, so what you need to do is manually go here, change E to D. Okay, and then so it gives you what the value is, 10 plus 80. Okay, press OK. That's it. So you should get the same value. Okay, but it's much easier. And remember, if you had started doing this here, you wouldn't even have to change the arguments, change the values. Okay, because it would automatically detected the previous two values and told you it's C4 to E4. Okay, this is supposed to be an easier way to calculate, but the idea still remains. Here it's average of numbers in the range between C4 to D4, and the second row it's C5, right, and D5. Hope that's clear. Okay, so we did the average two different ways. Okay, that's great. But let's say that midterm exam was too easy. Okay, and it's not that important. It only covered one chapter. And let's say that the final exam is a much better indicator of where the student is, okay, in terms of his or her grasp of concepts. All right, so I want to assign different weights. I don't want to assign equal weights, because when you calculate an average, right, you are weighing both scores equally. So let's say that I only want to weigh test midterm exam by 20%. Okay, I type in 20%, and I want to weigh the second exam obviously by 80%. Okay, so I change the weights. So how would you calculate the new final score? Okay, so I'm going to type in final here. This is really our final score, the real final score. Okay, but let's say that I want to calculate the final score. How would you calculate it? What we want to do is equal to, specifies that it's a formula, open parenthesis, right? So I want to take the first exam, C4, right? But I want to weight it 20%. So what I would do is multiply that 20%, close, plus open parenthesis, take the second score and weight this, right, by 80%. Okay, is that clear? So I weighed the first score by 20%, the second score by 80%. Press enter. The score for the student is 66. Okay, and now drag and drop. Oh, there's a problem here, right? So we dragged and dropped. Think about what happened. Okay, so what you saw here is C4 multiplied by C12, C4 multiplied by C12, D4 multiplied by D12, D4 multiplied by D12. Okay, so this is the right value for this particular cell. But when you try to autofill, right, look at what happened. So the value now is C5, which is here, which is what we want, 10 changed to 20, multiplied by C13. So where is C13? Come all the way down here, C13. Now we have a problem. So Excel, because it does referencing this way, where the values change automatically because it's trying to guess what you want, 20% change to nothing. So that's why you have a value problem. I think in this case it assumes it's 0. Then let's go back here. It says D5. D5 is right here, which is what you want. And the formula also says D13. Again, D12 becomes D13, which is something that you don't want. So in other words, you don't want D12 to become D13, and you don't want C12 to become C13. Okay, and hence you're getting bad values here. All right, so that's the problem. So I can ask you, how would you solve this problem? If you're smart, you're going to think about it and say, hey, why use C13? Instead, simply type in 20% directly, and you would be right. I could literally start the first formula by saying C4 multiplied by 20% plus D4 multiplied by 80%, and you would get the same value and you would be right. But in Excel, again, it's bad practice to enter the values of constants. This is an example of a constant. It doesn't really change. You don't want to enter this directly in the formula because here it's okay. It's not a very complicated spreadsheet, but in the future you might be dealing with very complex spreadsheets. So when you're using a constant, what you want to do is you want to define them properly here. So you would call them weights, right? And then maybe if you want to move this around a little bit, we can move it around, okay? And you want to assign them values explicitly. And this way, in the future, let's say that, okay, I'm going to make this 30%, okay? And let's say 70%. So if I want to change the weights, right? And you notice that the value changed here automatically because you don't want to be changing the weight in every single place where there is a value. Okay, while this might have worked the first time, if you entered 0.2 and 0.8 would have worked here the first time, whenever you change the weight, then you have to go back and change it in every single place where there is that value. Okay, so you don't want to do that. You want to enter it once, define it explicitly, and then use it appropriately in formulas. Okay, so we have this problem. We'll try to solve it in the next tutorial. For the time being, I want to leave you here and by saying that this is an example of Excel using referencing, and by default Excel uses something that I call relative cell addressing or relative referencing, where the cell value changes automatically from C4 to C5 and C12 to C13. Okay, in the next tutorial we'll come back and we'll try to solve this problem. See you.